What do you do when the most important day of your life turns into a nightmare you never saw coming? The chandeliers sparkled, casting a golden glow over my wedding day. I was in the midst of the celebration, dressed in a delicate lace gown, with Asher by my side, laughing with our guests. Everything seemed perfect, the music, the roses, the joy in the air. But there was something about Gwendolyn's gaze that made my stomach twist. She stood at the edge of the room, watching me with a look that felt more like a warning than a blessing. I tried to ignore it, but little did I know. The perfect day was about to fall apart. I'm Indigo, and just hours ago I had said "I do" to the man I thought was my soulmate. As I gazed at my reflection in the ballroom's golden mirrors, I felt like a princess in my delicate white lace dress. Everything seemed perfect, the pink and white roses adorning each table, the soft melodies playing in the background, the laughter of friends and family filling the room. "Indigo, you're glowing!" My best friend Luna squeezed my hand as we watched the guests enjoying themselves. Asher, my new husband, was laughing with relatives, looking dashing in his black tuxedo. I smiled back at him when our eyes met, and he winked playfully at me. But then, my attention shifted to his mother, Gwendolyn. She was standing in the corner, wearing an elegant navy blue dress, whispering to her sister while staring at me. There was something in her gaze that made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. It was my wedding day, nothing could ruin it. "Indigo, dear." Gwendolyn's voice broke through the music as she approached me. "Could you come here for a moment?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and I felt Luna's hand tighten around mine before letting go. "Of course," I said, smoothing my dress as I walked over. The wedding band on my finger still felt unfamiliar, yet strangely comforting. Gwendolyn's eyes locked on the pearl necklace I was wearing. "I see you're wearing our family heirloom," she said, her voice sharp despite her forced smile. "Who gave you permission to wear it?" I gently touched the pearls, feeling their cool weight. "Asher gave them to me this morning. He said it could be my something borrowed." Gwendolyn's face turned bright red. "Those pearls were meant for my daughter. How dare you wear them without asking me first?" Her voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby guests who were starting to watch. I didn't know," I stammered, my cheeks burning with embarrassment. "Asher said it would be fine." "Asher doesn't make decisions about family heirlooms," Gwendolyn snapped, reaching for the necklace. "Take them off right now." I stepped back, holding the pearls protectively against my chest. "Please, Gwendolyn, not here. We can talk about this later, Mom." "Indigo, what's going on?" Asher appeared beside us, looking confused. He placed a hand on my shoulder, but Gwendolyn grabbed his arm, her face flushed with anger. "She's wearing my mother's pearls, Asher, the ones meant for your sister, and now she won't give them back." "Indigo, maybe you should—" Asher started, but I cut him off, my voice firm. "You gave these to me," I said, meeting his gaze. "You said your grandmother would have wanted me to wear them." Gwendolyn's face turned an even darker shade of red, her voice shaking with fury. "Liar! You're nothing but a gold digger. First my son, now my family's treasures." The music had stopped completely, and the entire room had gone silent. Everyone was watching us now, a few murmurs echoing around the ballroom. "Mom, calm down!" Asher tried to intervene, his face strained, but Gwendolyn wasn't finished. "She's been manipulating you from day one, Asher. Can't you see it?" Gwendolyn was almost screaming now, her voice growing louder with each word. "She's trying to steal everything from us." Before I could defend myself, Asher's face changed. The confusion in his eyes turned to anger. In one swift motion, he bent down, took off his leather shoe, and struck me on the head with it. The room went silent. I stood frozen, my hand moving to my throbbing scalp. The pain wasn't just physical, it was the shock, the humiliation, the betrayal. Luna rushed to my side as tears filled my eyes. "Oh God, Indigo, Asher reached for me, but I stepped back. "Don't touch me," I whispered, my voice surprisingly steady despite the chaos in my head. Looking around, I saw the horror on our guests' faces. Gwendolyn stood there, a small smile playing on her lips. "I think we're done here," I said, removing the pearl necklace and letting it fall to the floor. The sound it made seemed to echo through the silent room as I walked toward the exit, head held high despite the tears streaming down my face. I had no idea that this horrible moment would lead to something much bigger. Asher's call the next day would change everything, but not in the way anyone expected. I remember how I got to the hotel. Luna drove, I think, while I sat in silence, my wedding dress crumpled around me, the spot where the shoe hit still throbbing. The Riverside Hotel's front desk clerk took one look at my tear-stained face and wedding dress and immediately found me a room. No questions asked. "Indigo, you need to press charges," Luna said as she helped me out of my dress. Her hands were shaking with anger. "What Asher did? It's assault and in front of everyone." I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my white slip, feeling numb. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Calls from Asher, his family, my family, guests. I finally turned it off. The perfect wedding cake we'd spent weeks choosing was probably still sitting there untouched. The thought made me laugh, a hollow sound that turned into sobs. "I just don't understand," I whispered as Luna wrapped a hotel robe around my shoulders. Everything was perfect this morning. How did it all go so wrong? My social media was exploding. Someone had recorded the whole thing. The argument, the shoe, everything. The video was spreading fast. Wedding from Hell was trending locally. Some comments defended Asher, saying I must have provoked him. Others called for his arrest. "Your sister's on her way," Luna said, scrolling through her phone. "And your parents are trying to get an earlier flight back from their cruise." A knock at the door made me jump. Luna checked the peephole before opening it. It was Juniper, my makeup artist from the wedding. She looked worried. "I brought your overnight bag from the bridal suite," she said, stepping in. "And there's something else you should know." She hesitated, glancing at Luna. "What is it?" I asked, noticing how she clutched her phone. "I was taking behind-the-scenes photos all day, for my portfolio," Juniper explained, "and I caught something weird. Earlier, when Gwendolyn was getting ready, she pulled up a photo on her phone. The image showed Gwendolyn in her navy dress, but what caught my eye was what she was doing. She was on the phone, looking angry, and in her other hand was a document. The camera had caught it at just the right angle. I could make out what looked like bank statements. "I wouldn't have thought anything of it," Juniper continued. "But right after I took this, she saw me and completely freaked out, made me delete the photo. But I had automatic backup turned on." Luna took the phone, zooming in. "Indigo, look at the numbers on that statement. That's a lot of zeros." Another knock at the door made us all freeze. This time, when Luna checked, she turned to me with a pale face. "It's Asher." I stood up, pulling the robe tighter around me. "Don't open it." But then my phone, which I'd briefly turned back on, lit up with a message from him. 6 words that made my blood run cold. "I know what my mother did." My hands trembled as I stared at Asher's message. Luna and Juniper watched me, waiting to see what I'd do. Another text came through. "Please, Indigo, it's bigger than you know. Let me explain." "Don't you dare open that door," Luna warned, but I was already moving. Something in his messages seemed different, desperate, not angry. I opened the door just enough to see him. Asher stood there, still in his wedding suit, but now it was wrinkled, his tie was gone, and he looked scared. 5 minutes, I said firmly. "That's all you get." He stepped in, stopping when he saw Luna and Juniper. "I need to talk to you alone. Based on what you did, you don't get to make demands." Asher ran his hands through his hair, pacing back and forth. "The pearls. They weren't just jewelry. There was a USB drive hidden in the clasp. Mom's been laundering money through my company millions of dollars. The pearls held proof of everything." The room went eerily silent. Luna stepped forward, her eyes fixed on Asher. "Is that why you hit her? Over a USB drive?" "No!" Asher's voice cracked and he turned to me, his eyes filling with tears. I hid her because I'm a coward. My mom's been controlling me for years with these documents. When she started screaming about the pearls, I panicked. I knew what was on them and what would happen if she found out you had them. Start from the beginning, I demanded, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Asher sank into a chair, his body slumping as if the weight of everything was finally crashing down on him. Mom's been using my wedding planning business to launder money for some dangerous people. Every overpriced vendor, every inflated bill, it was all part of her scheme. I found out 6 months ago, but she had proof that I'd signed off on everything. She threatened to have me arrested if I didn't keep playing along. Suddenly, Juniper spoke up, holding her phone out. Like these bank statements? Asher's face drained of color when he saw the photo. Where did you get that? What I want to know, I interrupted, my voice cutting through the tension, is why you gave me those pearls if they were so dangerous. Because I wanted it to end, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I thought if you had the proof, somehow it would all come out, and I'd be free. But when Mom realized what I'd done, I broke. God, Indigo, I'm so sorry. My head was spinning. The wedding, the business, the pearls, it was all a front for something far darker. Where are the pearls now? Mom has them, he admitted, his voice full of defeat. She's probably destroyed the drive already. Just then, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered it, and a gruff voice came through the speaker. Mrs. Anderson, this is Detective Hayes. We need you to come down to the station. We've just arrested your mother-in-law for trying to leave the country. She had some interesting jewelry with her. I put the phone on speaker, and the detective continued. We've been investigating the Anderson Wedding Company for months. The evidence in those pearls, it's everything we needed. But we need your statement about what happened today. Looking at Asher, I saw the weight lift off his shoulders, a look of relief washing over his face. His mother's control was finally ending. But as I looked at him, I didn't feel pity, nor did I feel forgiveness. Instead, I felt something much stronger. Power. I'll be right there, Detective, I said. And I have a lot to tell you. Luna squeezed my hand as I gathered my things. Asher stood up, his voice pleading. Indigo, please. Save it for your statement. I cut him off before he could say another word. You hit me in front of 100 witnesses. Whatever happens next, you did that all on your own. The police station was buzzing with activity, even at this late hour. I sat in an interview room, still wearing my hotel robe over my slip, giving my statement to Detective Hayes. She was a sharp-eyed woman, jotting down every detail about the wedding, the pearls, and Asher's confession. Here's what we know, Hayes said, spreading photographs across the table. Gwendolyn Anderson has been using her son's wedding planning business to launder money for the past 5 years. High-profile weddings, inflated vendor costs, fake service charges, all of it going to offshore accounts. I stared at the photos, surveillance shots of Gwendolyn meeting with people in dark cars, spreadsheets showing millions in transactions, and a close-up of the pearl necklace. The USB drive was cleverly hidden in what looked like a simple clasp, Hayes explained. The pearls were her backup plan. Hayes explained every transaction, every contact, everything she needed to either continue her operation or bargain her way out of trouble. She never thought her son would give them to you. Luna, who had insisted on staying with me, leaned forward. But why keep records at all? Isn't that risky? Insurance, I realized, the pieces clicking together. She needed proof that Asher was involved to keep him quiet. But she kept it close, literally around her neck, where she thought it was safe. Detective Hayes nodded. Exactly. And now we need your help. We've got Gwendolyn in custody, but there's more to uncover. The wedding today was supposed to be her biggest operation yet. She pulled out more photos. I recognized some of the vendors from my wedding. The florist charged us 3 times the normal rate, the caterer with the excessive special handling fees, the photographer needed an unusual cash deposit. All these businesses, Hayes pointed to each photo, are connected to a larger network. Gwendolyn wasn't just laundering money. She was helping hide funds for an entire criminal organization. Your wedding was going to be their biggest payday yet. My stomach churned. All those guests? Were any of them? Some were under surveillance, yes. We've been watching for months, but we needed concrete evidence. Those pearls gave us everything. Just then, another detective poked his head in. Hayes, you need to see this. The Anderson Company's accounts, they're being drained. Someone's moving the money right now. Hayes jumped up. Can we trace it? Working on it, but there's something else we found. Emails. The wedding wasn't just about money laundering. They were planning something bigger for tomorrow. I felt cold despite my robe. Tomorrow? Hayes turned to me. Mrs. Anderson, Indigo. We need to move you to a safe location right now. What? Why? Luna grabbed my hand. Because according to these emails, the wedding was just phase 1. Phase 2 was scheduled for tomorrow, and it involved you, specifically. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The game isn't over, Indigo dear. It's just beginning. Love, Gwendolyn. Hayes quickly bagged my phone as evidence. We're taking you to a safe house, both of you. She nodded to Luna. And Indigo, we're going to need you to help us set a trap. Looking at the evidence spread across the table, the photos, the bank statements, the records of my wedding being used for crime, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt bride was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone ready to fight back. Tell me what you need me to do. The safe house was a small apartment on the outskirts of town. Detective Hayes' team had swept it for bugs twice before letting us in. Luna and I sat at a scratched kitchen table while Hayes laid out the plan. Gwendolyn's encrypted phone gave us access to her network, Hayes explained, showing us a complex diagram of connections, but she's still managing to run things from inside. We need to shut it all down at once, and you need me as bait, I said, understanding dawning. I was still in my slip with the hotel robe, but someone had brought me clothes, plain jeans and a sweater normal clothes, for what was turning out to be the most abnormal day of my life. We've intercepted messages about a meeting tomorrow, Hayes continued. They think you still have access to crucial information worth killing for. Luna's hand found mine under the table. This is insane. She's been through enough today, but I was already thinking it through. The wedding venue's security cameras suddenly, Juniper mentioned that her photos backed up automatically. What if there's backup security footage too? She asked. Hayes' eyes lit up. We could access the venue's cloud storage, she said. I know all the passwords, I added. Asher gave them to me for the planning. The next few hours were a blur of activity. We discovered that the venue's cameras had captured everything, including meetings in back rooms. We weren't supposed to know about Gwendolyn's network using my wedding as cover for a massive exchange of information and goods. Look at this. Luna pointed to footage from the bridal suite while I was getting ready. 3 different men had come to speak with Gwendolyn, all carrying identical blue gift bags. Those bags, Hayes leaned in closer. We've seen them before in other operations. They're used to transport data drives. I watched myself on the screen, blissfully getting my makeup done, while criminals used my wedding as their personal exchange center. The anger I felt was different now, cold, focused. So, what's the plan? I asked. Hayes smiled. Tomorrow, you're going to attend what they think is a simple information exchange. But really, she laid out a series of photos. You're going to help us take down their entire operation. The coffee shop looked ordinary enough. Morning sunlight streamed through large windows, and the smell of fresh pastries filled the air. I sat at a corner table, wearing a wire so thin it was practically invisible. In my hand, I clutched a USB drive that Hayes' team had prepared. Target approaching, Luna's voice came through my nearly invisible earpiece. She was posing as a casual customer, typing on her laptop nearby. Gwendolyn's lawyer was right on schedule. A tall man in an expensive suit slid into the seat across from me. "Mrs. Anderson," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I trust you've reconsidered your position about the wedding footage." "I have what Gwendolyn wants," I replied, keeping my voice steady. My hands wanted to shake, but I wouldn't let them. "But I need something first." "And what would that be?" He stirred his coffee, looking almost bored. "The truth, all of it. All of, why me? Why my wedding?" He leaned back in his chair, a smug smile on his face as he studied me. "You don't know, do you? Your father's company, the one that went bankrupt 5 years ago? Gwendolyn was behind that. She needed someone vulnerable, someone desperate enough to not ask questions when Asher showed interest." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. My father's business, the depression he'd sunk into, the struggles my family had endured, it was all part of Gwendolyn's manipulative plan. "You were perfect," he continued, the smirk never leaving his face. "Young, naive, so grateful for Asher's attention, the ideal cover for our operation." "That operation's over," I replied coldly, my voice steady. At the signal, everything happened in a split second. Hayes's team surged forward, closing in on him from every angle. The lawyer made a move toward his jacket, but Luna was faster, spilling his coffee all over him. He shouted in surprise, leaping right into the arms of 2 officers. "It's over." Luna's voice crackled in my earpiece as the lawyer was swiftly taken into custody. I could hear the coordinated arrests happening all over the city. Gwendolyn's entire network was being dismantled. Moments later, Martina entered, her expression satisfied. "We got them all," she said, "including some very interesting documents from your friend here." She nodded toward the lawyer being led away in cuffs. "Gwendolyn?" I asked, my voice steady as I tried to make sense of it all. "She's trying to make a deal," Hayes replied, holding up the USB drive we'd used as bait. "But with this evidence, she won't have much to bargain with." The coffee shop, now filled with police gathering evidence, felt like the calm before the storm. "Is it over?" I asked. Hayes squeezed my shoulder. "The criminal part is. The rest is up to you." 3 months later, the courtroom was packed. I sat straight-backed in a simple blue dress, watching Gwendolyn and her network receive their sentences. Asher was there too, having taken a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against his mother. The judge's voice rang out, firm and resolute. "Mrs. Anderson orchestrated a sophisticated money laundering operation, using her son's wedding planning business to hide criminal activities, manipulating vulnerable families, and resorting to violence." The court sentenced her to 20 years. Gwendolyn didn't look at me as they led her away. Asher tried to catch my eye, but I focused straight ahead. The divorce papers had been finalized just the week before. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting with cameras and microphones. Luna stood beside me as I made a brief statement. "Today isn't just about justice for me," I said into the microphone. "It's for every family they targeted, every bride whose special day they tried to ruin. Sometimes, the happiest day of your life can turn into your strongest moment." Later that evening, I stood in my new apartment, looking out over the twinkling city lights. The box of wedding gifts had been donated, and the dress given to charity. The tan line where my wedding ring had been was finally fading. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Luna. "Ready for tomorrow?" I smiled, glancing at the business cards on my counter. Indigo Mitchell, wedding security consultant. After my story went viral, wedding planning companies had approached me. Turns out, my experience had made me uniquely qualified to spot red flags in the industry. "Ready," I texted back. The city lights sparkled like stars, and for the first time in months, I felt truly free. My wedding day had been a disaster, but it had given me something far more valuable than a perfect ceremony. It had shown me my strength. Have you ever been pushed to your limits by betrayal, only to find that what seemed like your worst moment was actually your turning point? Can we ever truly understand our strength until it's tested? Indigo's wedding day, which should have been the happiest of her life, quickly devolved into a nightmare when her new husband, Asher, hit her in front of their guests, and his mother, Gwendolyn, revealed their dark secrets. Asher's confession about his involvement in his mother's money laundering operation sent Indigo into a whirlwind of legal battles and personal revelations. Instead of caving to the humiliation, Indigo found her power, working with law enforcement to bring down Gwendolyn's criminal network. After months of investigation and daring operations, Gwendolyn was sentenced to 20 years, and Asher testified against his mother, but their marriage was over. Indigo found strength in this painful chapter, turning her experience into a new purpose, helping others spot red flags in the wedding planning industry and finding her true independence. Indigo's story is a testament to the incredible resilience that can arise from facing the most painful truths. Her wedding was supposed to symbolize the start of a beautiful future, but instead, it unraveled the web of manipulation and deceit that had been woven around her for months. Her first response to the violence and betrayal could have been despair, but instead, it was defiance. When Asher confessed to his involvement in the money laundering scheme, Indigo didn't retreat into silence or shame. She chose to fight back, not just for herself, but for all the families and victims that Gwendolyn had manipulated. By taking control of the narrative, choosing to expose the truth, and help law enforcement dismantle the operation, Indigo turned her pain into purpose. Her decision to walk away from the abuse, her marriage, and the toxic family dynamic was not just a physical act. It was an emotional and spiritual rebirth. The pain of betrayal, rather than breaking her, made her stronger. As she emerged from the storm, Indigo found herself not just surviving, but thriving, turning her tragedy into a career built on the lessons she learned. Her story is one of reclaiming power in the face of abuse, and a reminder that sometimes the darkest moments lead to the brightest transformations. What would you do if everything you trusted was shattered in front of you? Could you find the strength to stand up, even when the world seems against you? What do you think can we find our greatest strength in our hardest moments? Have you ever experienced something that turned your life upside down, but ended up showing you your true potential? Share your stories in the comments, and let's start a conversation about how we can all rise from the ashes. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more empowering stories of transformation. Sometimes, choosing yourself is the bravest thing you can do.
I stared at the phone in my hand, sleek, black, definitely not mine. The screen lit up with another message, "Missing you already, baby." My stomach twisted as I scrolled through dozens of similar texts, each one a dagger to my gut. I'm Gracie, and 5 minutes ago, I was just doing laundry. Checking pockets before tossing David's jacket in the wash, a habit from when Eli was little and would stuff rocks and half-eaten candies in his coat. Now my 6-year-old knows better than his father. "Mommy, can we have pizza tonight?" Eli's voice floated down from upstairs, innocent and clear. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Sure, sweetie. Just give me a minute." Amazing how steady my voice sounded while my world cracked apart. The messages went back months. Pictures, too, nothing explicit, thank God, but enough to tell the story. Dinner dates. Stolen kisses. Weekend getaways when David said he was at business conferences. Her name was Rachel. She had a dimple in her right cheek and wore too much mascara. "Is Daddy coming home for dinner?" Eli appeared at the bottom of the stairs, clutching his favorite dinosaur. I shoved the phone into my pocket. "Not tonight, baby. He's working late." Another lie to add to the pile David had been building. He's always working late now. Eli's lower lip trembled slightly. "Come here." I pulled him close, breathing in the scent of apple shampoo and fruit snacks. "How about we make that pizza ourselves? With extra cheese?" His face brightened. "Can I put pepperoni in the shape of a T-Rex?" "Absolutely." I forced a smile, already calculating my next move. The phone in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. While Eli arranged his prehistoric pepperoni masterpiece, I sent myself screenshots of every damning conversation. My hands shook, but I managed to reset the phone to factory settings before slipping it back into David's jacket pocket. He wouldn't know I'd seen it. Not yet. Look, Mommy. It's roaring. Eli pointed proudly at his creation. That's amazing, sweetie. I ruffled his hair, remembering how David used to do the same thing. How many other habits and gestures had he shared with her? The front door opened at 7:30. David's footsteps in the hallway, his briefcase hitting the floor with a thud. I'd heard this sound thousands of times before, but tonight it made my skin crawl. Something smells good. He appeared in the kitchen doorway, all perfect smile and loosened tie. We made pizza. Eli launched himself at his father. Look, it's a T-Rex. Wow, buddy, that's incredible. David scooped him up, and for a moment, I saw the man I married, the one who used to spend hours building blanket forts and reading bedtime stories. What happened to him? How was work? I asked, my voice honey-sweet with poison. Busy. That merger's killing me. He didn't meet my eyes, already setting Eli down and heading for the stairs. I need a shower. I watched him go, thinking about the message from Rachel timestamped 2 hours ago. Lunch was perfect. Can't wait until next time. The pizza tasted like cardboard in my mouth, but I smiled through dinner, laughed at Eli's jokes, and pretended everything was normal. Later, after tucking Eli in, I sat in the dark of his room, watching his chest rise and fall. Gracie? David's whisper, from the doorway. Coming to bed? I turned to look at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. In a minute. He nodded and disappeared, probably already reaching for his secret phone to message her goodnight. I stayed there, in the dark, planning. David thought he was so clever with his hidden phone and careful lies. He had no idea what was coming. Because while he'd been busy destroying our family, he'd forgotten one crucial thing: I'd always been smarter than him. The coffee shop buzzed with weekend crowds, but Samantha's voice cut through the noise like a knife. You need to nail the bastard to the wall. I traced the rim of my untouched latte, the screenshots from David's phone burning a hole in my pocket. It's not that simple. There's Eli to think about. Exactly why you can't let David get away with this. Samantha leaned forward, her eyes fierce. What kind of example does it set if? My phone lit up with David's message, taking Eli to the zoo today. Don't wait up. He's doing it again, I said, showing her the screen. Making plans without asking, probably meeting her there. The zoo? Samantha's eyebrows shot up. Isn't that where you had your first date? The memory hit like a punch to the gut. David, younger and earnest, buying me cotton candy and telling terrible jokes about the penguins. Now he was probably doing the same routine with Rachel, recycling our history like used furniture. I'm going, I announced, grabbing my purse. I need to see for myself. Gracie, wait, but I was already heading for the door. The zoo parking lot was packed. I spotted David's car easily, the silver BMW he'd insisted on buying last year, another warning sign I'd missed. I parked far enough away and waited. 20 minutes later, they emerged. David held Eli's hand, and Rachel walked on his other side, her fingers brushing against his arm. They looked like a perfect little family, and bile rose in my throat. Look, Daddy. Eli pointed at something, bouncing with excitement. Rachel laughed, touching David's shoulder with casual intimacy. My phone buzzed. Samantha, don't do anything crazy. Think of Eli. I watched them disappear into the crowd, my hands shaking as I typed a response. Too late. That evening, David brought home a tired but happy Eli, who clutched a stuffed penguin. Mommy, we saw lions. And penguins. Anne. That's wonderful, sweetie. I kissed his forehead, breathing in the scent of sugar and excitement. Why don't you go get ready for bath time? David lingered in the kitchen, loosening his tie. He had a great time today. I'm sure he did. I kept my voice neutral, loading dishes into the dishwasher. The zoo's always been special, hasn't it? He paused, something flickering across his face. What do you mean? Nothing. I smiled, all teeth. Just remembering our first date there. The cotton candy, the penguin jokes. You still tell those? The color drained from his face. Gracie. Daddy. Eli called from upstairs. Can you read me a story? David hesitated, looking between me and the stairs. We should talk. Should we? Seems like you've been doing plenty of talking with someone else. I turned away, my hand steady as I wiped the counter. Better not keep Eli waiting. He's had such a special day with his daddy. Later, after Eli was asleep, David found me in the living room. About today. Save it. I stood up, gathering the scattered toys. I have a meeting with my lawyer tomorrow. Lawyer? His voice cracked. Why would you? To discuss my options. I met his eyes. Unless you'd like to tell me about Rachel now? He stumbled backward, like I'd struck him. How did you? Does it matter? I moved past him, toward the stairs. By the way, you should be more careful with your phones. Both of them. Wait, please, he grabbed my arm. We can work this out. For Eli's sake. I jerked away. Don't you dare use our son as a shield. Not after parading your girlfriend around him at the zoo. She's not, it's not what you think. No? I pulled out my phone, showing him the screenshots. Then explain these. Actually, don't bother. Save it for the lawyer. I left him standing there, mouth open, excuses dying on his lips. Upstairs, I checked on Eli, his new penguin clutched tight against his chest. The sight of it made my heart ache, but it also strengthened my resolve. David thought he could rewrite our history, replace me in our family story. But he'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't just a character he could write out. I was the author of my own revenge, and his chapter was about to end. The restaurant's warm lighting couldn't soften Rachel's sharp features as she stirred her untouched coffee. I don't understand. Who did you say you were again? Gracie Thompson. My voice stayed steady, despite the rage bubbling beneath my skin. David's wife. The color drained from her face. Wife. But he said, she stopped, her perfectly manicured fingers trembling around her cup. Let me guess. He told you we were separated? Getting divorced? I pulled out my phone, sliding it across the table. Here's Eli's birthday party, from 2 months ago. Notice how happy Daddy looks, blowing out the candles with our son? Rachel stared at the photo, her mascara-heavy lashes blinking rapidly. He said Eli was his nephew. That hit harder than I expected. David hadn't just erased me, he'd denied his own son. Interesting. Was that before or after he took you to the zoo? To our spot? I need to go. She grabbed her purse, but I caught her wrist. Sit down, Rachel. We're not finished. She sank back into her chair, mascara smudging as tears formed. I didn't know. You have to believe me. Oh, I believe you. I released her wrist. David's good at lying. To everyone. My phone buzzed, David's face appearing on screen. I showed it to Rachel. Want to answer it? She shook her head, wiping her eyes. How long have you known? Long enough to gather evidence. Bank statements, hotel receipts, photos. I leaned forward. Tell me, does your company know you've been sleeping with a board member? Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. Try me. The coffee between us had gone cold, like the space where my heart used to be. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to end it. Today. And then you're going to write down everything, dates, places, conversations. Every lie he told you, every promise he made. Why would I help you? Because if you don't, the board gets an anonymous tip about your relationship. Your career versus his marriage seems like an easy choice. Rachel's lips trembled. He said he loved me. He said that to me too, right before he took our son to the zoo with his girlfriend. I stood up, dropping cash on the table. You have until tomorrow. And Rachel? He has a tell when he's lying, that little smile, right before he feeds you the perfect line you want to hear. Watch for it next time. Outside, my phone buzzed again. David's message, where are you? We need to talk. I typed back, yes, we do. Bring your other phone. The drive home felt surreal, like I was watching someone else navigate through traffic. David's car was already in the driveway when I arrived. Through the window, I could see him pacing in the kitchen. My phone lit up one last time. Rachel, I'll tell you everything. I walked into my house, our house, where family photos still hung on the walls like artifacts from another life. David spun around, his face pale. Where were you? He demanded. Having coffee with Rachel. I watched the blood drain from his face. She says hello. He stumbled back against the counter. Gracie, please. Save it. I pulled out a manila envelope. Inside are divorce papers, a custody agreement, and copies of everything I have on you and Rachel. Sign them all, and this stays private. Fight me, and everyone finds out, your parents, your boss, everyone. You're blackmailing me? No, David. I'm giving you what you wanted, freedom to be with Rachel. Oh wait, I checked my phone, showing him Rachel's message, maybe not anymore. He lunged for the phone, but I stepped back. Don't. You've taken enough from me. What about Eli? His voice cracked. He needs his father. You should have thought about that before you made him your fictional nephew. I headed for the stairs, leaving the envelope on the counter. You have until tomorrow to sign. After that, I stopped being nice. Gracie, he called after me. I'm sorry. I paused on the stairs, not turning around. No, you're sorry you got caught. But don't worry, I'm just getting started. Linda's hands trembled as she set down her teacup. I found these in Paul's study. She slid a stack of papers across the kitchen table. David's been planning this for months. Bank statements. Investment accounts. Property deeds. All carefully hidden, all moved into offshore accounts. My stomach lurched as I saw the dates. The first transfer was made the day after Eli's birthday party. There's more, Linda whispered, glancing toward the doorway as if Paul might appear. He's been interviewing for positions in Chicago. The room tilted sideways. Chicago? Paul overheard him on the phone. He's already accepted an offer. Linda reached for my hand. He can't take Eli, Gracie. I won't let him. I pulled away, pacing the sunlit kitchen where I'd spent countless holidays with this family. Why are you showing me this? Because I failed my own daughter 30 years ago. Linda's voice cracked. I watched Paul destroy her in their divorce, take everything, including my grandchildren. I won't watch it happen again. A car door slammed outside, Paul's distinctive heavy footsteps on the porch. Linda snatched the papers, stuffing them into my bag. Thursday nights, he plays bridge. The safe combination is Eli's birthday. Paul burst in, his presence filling the room. Well, if it isn't my favorite daughter-in-law. Finally come to talk some sense into that boy of mine? I forced a smile, shouldering my bag. Just catching up with Linda. Good, good. He kissed Linda's cheek, but I caught her slight flinch. David tells me you're being difficult about the divorce. Think of Eli. I am thinking of Eli. My voice could have frozen hell. Every second of every day. Back home, I spread the papers across my desk, piecing together David's plan. The bastard had been methodically hiding money since before Rachel, preparing his escape route while playing the devoted father. My phone buzzed. David, taking Eli to dinner. Don't wait up. My fingers flew across the keyboard. No. Excuse me? You heard me. No more spontaneous dinners. No more surprise trips. You want to see your son? Go through my lawyer. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, you can't do this. Watch me. I called Samantha, my voice steady despite the rage burning through my veins. I need your help. Bring your camera. That night, while David was working late, we followed him to an upscale realtor's office. Through the window, I watched him shake hands with a woman in a power suit, accepting a folder labeled Chicago Properties. Got it? I asked Samantha, who nodded, reviewing the photos on her camera. Every sleazy second. She squeezed my arm. What's your play? I thought of Linda's haunted eyes, of Paul's casual dominance, of all the carefully hidden papers. I'm going nuclear. The next morning, I walked into David's office building, straight past security, my heels clicking against marble floors. His secretary's eyes widened as I approached. Mrs. Thompson. Mr. Thompson is in a meeting. I pushed open his office door. David sat with 3 board members, mid-presentation. Honey. His fake smile appeared. This isn't a good time. Actually, it's perfect. I dropped a thick folder on the conference table. Since everyone's here, we can discuss your plans for Chicago. And these offshore accounts. Oh, and let's not forget Rachel from marketing. The blood drained from his face as the board members reached for the documents. Gracie, please. I particularly enjoyed the part where you planned to take our son across state lines without my knowledge. I turned to the shocked executives. Gentlemen, you'll find copies of everything in there, including proof of funds misappropriation. I've already sent duplicates to the SEC. This is a private matter, David sputtered. Not anymore. I headed for the door, pausing to look back at the wreckage of his career. By the way, Linda says hello. Funny how karma works, isn't it? In the elevator, my phone lit up with messages from David, each more desperate than the last. I deleted them all, thinking of Linda's words, I won't watch it happen again. Neither would I. The emergency room's fluorescent lights cast a sickly glow over Eli's pale face. His small hand burned with fever in mine as the doctor rattled off terms like severe pneumonia and immediate treatment. Where's your husband? The nurse's innocent question felt like acid in my throat. He's coming. Another lie to add to the growing pile. David's phone went straight to voicemail, all 5 times I'd called. Samantha arrived first, bringing coffee and a change of clothes. Any word from him? I showed her my phone, a text from Rachel sent an hour ago, having dinner with David. He seems stressed. Everything okay? I'll kill him, Samantha whispered, watching Eli's chest rise and fall with each labored breath. Not if I get to him first. The night crawled by. Eli's fever spiked at midnight, bringing a flurry of medical staff and more medication. Through it all, David's absence echoed like a scream in an empty room. At 3 a.m., my phone lit up, David's face appearing on screen. Where are you? Just got your messages. Mount Sinai Hospital. Emergency room. My voice could have frozen hell. Your son's been here for 8 hours with pneumonia. Silence. Then, I was in a meeting. At Lou Bernardine? With Rachel? I watched Eli's oxygen levels on the monitor. Hope the wine was worth it. That's not fair. Room 412. Show up or don't. Either way, you've made your choice. He arrived 30 minutes later, still wearing his dinner suit, reeking of expensive wine. How is he? Now you care? I stood between him and Eli's bed. Where were you when he couldn't breathe? When they had to hold him down for the 4? I made a mistake. No, a mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This? I gestured to our sick child. This is who you are now. Eli stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Daddy? David moved toward the bed, but I grabbed his arm. If you go to him now, smelling like her perfume, we're done. No lawyers, no negotiations. I'll burn everything down, your career, your reputation, everything. He stepped back, pain flashing across his face. You can't keep me from my son. Watch me. I turned away, focusing on Eli. Go back to sleep, sweetie. Daddy was just leaving. The door clicked shut behind him. Eli's monitor beeped steadily as tears slid down his fevered cheeks. Why doesn't Daddy want to stay? My heart shattered into a million pieces. Sometimes grown-ups make bad choices, baby. But I promise, I'm not going anywhere. Morning brought Linda, carrying fresh clothes and righteous anger. Paul's furious. He's threatening to cut David off completely. Good. I watched Eli sleep, his breathing finally easier. Did you know they were at Lou Bernardine last night? While Eli was here? Linda's face hardened. That restaurant was where Paul proposed to me. David's recycling all our family memories with her. My phone buzzed. David again, we need to talk. About everything. Yes, I typed back, we do. I hope she was worth losing your son over. Linda squeezed my hand. What will you do now? I thought about the offshore accounts, the Chicago plans, the missed calls while our son struggled to breathe. Everything you wished you'd done 30 years ago. He'll fight back, she warned. Let him. I stroked Eli's hair, feeling his fever finally breaking. He chose his battlefield when he left our son alone in this hospital. The morning sun crept through the window, painting Eli's face in gold. In the quiet, watching him breathe, I realized something. Revenge wasn't about hurting David anymore. It was about protecting what he'd thrown away, this precious life he'd deemed less important than a dinner date. My phone lit up one last time. Rachel, David told me about Eli. I'm so sorry. I never meant. I deleted the message without reading further. Sorry wouldn't erase Eli's tears or heal his fever. Sorry wouldn't undo David's choices. But justice might. The conference room at David's law firm felt like a tomb. 8 pairs of eyes watched me set up my laptop, including David's, bloodshot and desperate. Rachel sat at the far end, mascara smeared from crying. Perfect. Mrs. Thompson, the managing partner, cleared his throat. You claim to have evidence of financial misconduct? I clicked through the first slides, bank transfers, property documents, all bearing David's signature. My husband has been systematically hiding assets for months, preparing to flee the state with our son. David's chair scraped against hardwood. That's not. Sit down. Paul's voice cracked like a whip. He'd insisted on attending, despite David's protests. Let her finish. The next slide showed text messages, hotel receipts, restaurant bills. Rachel's soft sobbing provided the perfect soundtrack to David's downfall. While embezzling company funds, I continued, he was also carrying on an affair with Rachel Miller from marketing. Using company resources to finance their relationship. You vindictive bitch, David snarled, mask finally slipping. You think this makes you noble? Destroying everything just to hurt me? I met his eyes. No, what makes me noble is that I waited until Eli was released from the hospital before doing this. Something about basic human decency you wouldn't understand. The managing partner raised his hand. These offshore accounts were set up the day after our son's birthday party. I played the final card. The same day David accepted a position with your Chicago competitors. I have those emails too. The room erupted. Partners shouting, Rachel fleeing in tears, Paul's face purple with rage. Through it all, David stared at me, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. You've ruined everything, he whispered. No, you did that yourself. Security arrived to escort David out. I packed my laptop, hands steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Victory tasted like ashes. The parking garage was dark when I left. My footsteps echoed between concrete pillars, keys clutched like weapons. Feel better now? David emerged from behind a column, tie loose, eyes wild. Proud of yourself? Stay back. I reached for my phone. Or what? You'll destroy me again? He laughed, harsh and broken. There's nothing left to take. There's Eli. Wrong thing to say. David lunged forward, grabbing my arm. You won't keep my son from me. Let go. I twisted away, but his fingers dug deeper. I gave you everything. His voice echoed off concrete walls. The house, the lifestyle, all of it. And this is how you repay me? You gave me lies. I wrenched free, stumbling backward. You gave me betrayal and empty promises while planning your escape. I loved you. He swung wildly, fist connecting with the pillar beside my head. No, I whispered, you loved yourself. Security cameras caught everything, his rage, my fear, the moment he nearly crossed a line he couldn't uncross. Tomorrow, those videos would reach the judge handling our custody case. Another nail in David's coffin. But tonight, sitting in my car with shaking hands, victory felt hollow. Eli's voice echoed in my head, why doesn't Daddy want to stay? My phone lit up, Linda, Paul's disowning him. It's done. Then Rachel, I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. Finally, Samantha, Eli's asking for his father. I stared at the messages through blurring tears. I'd won, destroyed David's career, exposed his lies, secured Eli's future. So why did it feel like I'd lost something too? The garage's shadow stretched like prison bars across my windshield. Somewhere above, David was probably clearing out his office, his carefully constructed life crumbling around him. Just like I'd planned. But revenge, I was learning, was like a double-edged sword. In cutting him down, I'd drawn my own blood too. And somewhere in this wreckage, our 6-year-old son still waited for his father to come home. I started the car, hands steady now. One last text arrived, David, you'll regret this. Maybe. But I'd regret letting him hurt Eli more. Sometimes victory tastes like ashes, but ashes make fertile ground for new beginnings. Paul's study felt smaller than I remembered, the leather and mahogany closing in like a trap. David sat across from his father's desk, shoulders slumped, while Paul paced behind him. You're not just a disappointment, Paul's voice cut through the silence. You're a disgrace to this family. I hadn't planned to be here for this, but Linda had insisted. He needs to see what he's lost, she'd whispered, squeezing my hand. I can explain, David started. Explain what? Paul slammed a folder onto the desk. How you embezzled from your firm? Betrayed your wife? Abandoned your sick child? Each accusation landed like a physical blow. David's fingers twitched toward the crystal decanter on the side table, another inherited habit, another weakness exposed. Or explain how you planned to steal your son away to Chicago. I added quietly. Using money from your father's trust fund? David's head snapped up. You told them about that too? No, son. Paul's laugh was bitter. Your mother found the paperwork months ago. We've been watching you destroy yourself ever since. Linda stepped forward from her corner. We thought you'd come to your senses. Choose your family. Like you did, Mom? David's voice dripped venom. Standing in the corner while Dad runs everything? Is that what family means? Don't you dare, Paul growled, but Linda raised her hand. No, let him speak. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. Let him explain why he's following your example, Paul. The affairs, the secrets, the controlling everything through money. The room froze. Paul's face went from red to white. Linda. The difference is, she continued, I stayed silent to protect our children. Gracie spoke up to protect hers. David laughed, harsh and hollow. Protect him? She's destroying his life. No, I stepped closer, forcing him to meet my eyes. You did that when you chose Rachel over his hospital bed. When you planned to tear him away from everything he knows. I love my son. You love yourself more. He lunged forward, but Paul caught his arm. Enough. Let him go, I said quietly. Let him show Eli exactly who his father is. David wrenched free, breathing hard. You've taken everything. My job, my reputation. Your offshore accounts? Paul interrupted. The trust fund? Yes, those are gone too. As of this morning, everything's been transferred to an education trust for Eli. The color drained from David's face. You can't. I can and I did. Paul sat heavily behind his desk. It's what your grandfather would have wanted. Family money for family values. Then I'll fight it, David snarled. All of it. The divorce, custody, everything. With what? Linda's voice was almost gentle. Your firm's partners are cooperating with the SEC. Rachel's given a full statement. Even your Chicago position's been withdrawn. I watched the reality sink in, watched David's carefully constructed world crumble, completely. In that moment, he looked startlingly like the man I'd married, lost, vulnerable, human. I never meant, he whispered. I know. And suddenly, I did. You never meant for any of this. Just like you never meant to miss Eli's hospital stay, or hurt me, or become your father. Paul flinched. Linda reached for his hand. But you did. I moved toward the door. And now you have to live with it. Gracie, please, David's voice cracked. I'll lose everything. No, I turned back one last time. You'll lose what you took for granted. There's a difference. Outside, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of ending. My phone buzzed. Samantha, Eli's asking when you'll be home. Home. Not the house we'd shared with David, but the small apartment where Eli and I were building something new. Something honest. It's done, I texted back. On my way. Behind me, I could hear David's muffled sobs through the study door, mixed with Paul's stern voice and Linda's softer tones. The sound should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like closure. Like turning the final page of a story that had run its course. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone else. Sometimes it's about saving yourself. The moving boxes made our new apartment feel smaller, but Eli's laughter filled every corner as he arranged his dinosaurs on the windowsill. Each plastic figure faced east, toward the sunrise, he insisted, just like real dinosaurs would have done. My phone buzzed with a text from David, please. Just 5 minutes with him. I deleted it without responding, just like the dozens before it. The divorce papers lay signed on my desk, next to a letter from Linda that had arrived that morning. I hadn't opened it yet, wasn't sure I wanted to. Mommy, look. Eli held up his favorite T-Rex. He's protecting the little ones now. Just like you protect me, I said, pulling him close. He squirmed in my arms, suddenly serious. Is Daddy ever coming back? The question I'd been dreading. No, sweetie. But that doesn't mean he doesn't love you. I know. Eli returned to his dinosaurs. He's like the meteors in my book. Too big and scary for the little dinosaurs to survive. My heart cracked at his simple wisdom. 6 years old, and he understood more than David ever had. The doorbell rang, Samantha with pizza and paint samples. Time to make this place yours, she announced, spreading colors across the kitchen counter. Green. Eli pointed to a sage swatch. Like the park near Grandma Linda's. Linda's letter seemed to pulse on my desk. I finally opened it while Eli debated paint colors with Samantha. Dearest Gracie. Paul doesn't know I'm writing this. He's still trying to fix David, as if our son were a broken investment to be restructured. But you and I know better. I spent 30 years watching Paul become the man David tried to be, successful, powerful, empty. I stayed because I thought it would protect my children. You left because you knew it would protect yours. You're braver than I ever was. The trust fund Paul set up for Eli isn't charity, it's insurance. Insurance that David can never use money to control him the way Paul controlled our family. Use it wisely. And Gracie? Thank you for showing me it's never too late to stand up. With love. Linda. Mommy? Eli's voice pulled me back. Can we paint my room today? Sure, baby. I wiped my eyes, tucking the letter away. But first, there's something I need to show you. I pulled out the photo album I'd rescued from our old house. Not the formal portraits David had insisted on, but the real moments, Eli's first steps, beach trips, pillow forts. Pages of love and laughter, untainted by what came after. This is our story, I told him, watching his fingers trace each image. And we're going to keep making it, just us. And Aunt Samantha? And Aunt Samantha, I laughed. And Grandma Linda, whenever you want. But not the meteors, he said firmly, returning to his dinosaur metaphor. No, not the meteors. My phone lit up one last time. Rachel, he's in rehab. Wanted you to know. I set the phone aside, focusing instead on Eli's careful arrangement of paint swatches into a rainbow. Some stories don't need neat endings. Some revenge isn't about destruction, but reconstruction. Building something stronger from the wreckage. Ready to paint? Samantha held up rollers like swords. Eli grabbed one, immediately dotting my nose with green. His giggle echoed off bare walls, filling empty spaces with possibility. This wasn't the ending I'd imagined when I'd first found David's hidden phone. It was better. Because revenge hadn't given me back what I'd lost, it had given me something new. A chance to write our own story, without shadows or secrets. Just a mother, a son, and a future as bright as dinosaurs facing the sunrise.
Expensive perfume and whispered voices. That's what betrayal smells and sounds like when you're standing outside your mother-in-law's study, frozen in place, hands still raised to knock. I didn't mean to eavesdrop. But sometimes life's most devastating moments arrive wrapped in the most mundane packages. Mark deserves better than that woman, Helen's voice slithered through the gap beneath the door. Emily, dear, you're exactly what this family needs. Young, ambitious, and most importantly, manageable. A younger woman's laugh, light and practiced. Helen, you're too kind. But Mark is married, and Rose is pregnant. Pregnancies can be complicated. Especially at her age. And marriages? Well, they end all the time. I'm Rose. Until this moment, I thought I was living a fairly decent life. Engineering consultant, married to Mark Mitchell for 3 years, and 5 months pregnant with our first child. Now I stood in my in-laws' hallway, learning that my mother-in-law was actively plotting to replace me with someone named Emily. My fingers pressed against my belly, an instinctive gesture of protection. The baby kicked, as if sensing my distress. The timing is perfect, Helen continued. Rose's hormones are making her unstable. Mark's already noticed, I've made sure of that. A few more carefully placed comments about her emotional state, some concerns about her ability to handle motherhood. And you think he'll leave her? Emily's voice held a note of skepticism. Men are simple creatures, dear. Show them a better option while their current one appears to be falling apart. Well, nature takes its course. I should have burst in. Should have confronted them. Instead, I backed away silently, my designer heels, a gift from Helen last Christmas, not making a sound on the plush carpet. The front door closed behind me with a soft click. I made it to my car before the shaking started. My hands trembled so badly I dropped my keys twice before managing to unlock the door. Inside the car, I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. The late afternoon sun painted everything in deceptively warm hues, including the Mitchell family's sprawling Victorian home. 3 years I'd been coming here for Sunday dinners, trying to please a woman who'd apparently been plotting my downfall the entire time. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark, everything okay? Mom said you were supposed to stop by to discuss the baby shower. Of course she did. Helen probably timed it perfectly, wanting me to walk in on that conversation. A test, maybe. Or just another way to torture me. I typed back, got called away for work emergency. Rain check? The response came quickly, no problem, honey. Mom's disappointed but understands. Dinner tonight? Mom's disappointed. How many times had I heard that phrase? How many times had Mark unconsciously sided with her, making me feel like I was failing some impossible standard? The baby kicked again, harder this time. My hand returned to my belly, and suddenly everything crystallized with perfect clarity. This wasn't just about me anymore. Helen Mitchell wasn't just trying to destroy my marriage, she was threatening my child's future, their family, their stability. I started the car, my mind already racing ahead. Helen wanted to play games? Fine. But she'd forgotten something crucial: I solve problems for a living. Complex, technical problems that require patience, strategy, and attention to detail. And now I had a new project, making sure Helen Mitchell never threatened my family again. As I pulled away from the house, I caught a glimpse of Helen in an upstairs window, watching me leave. She raised her hand in a wave, probably believing she'd won this round. Poor Helen. She had no idea she'd just started a war. The Mitchell family dining room always felt like a stage. With its crystal chandelier and antique furniture carefully arranged for maximum dramatic effect. Tonight, watching Helen arrange her sterling silver place settings, I understood why. Every Sunday dinner was a performance, and I'd been cast as the villain without even knowing it. Rose, darling, you're looking a bit peaked. Helen's concern dripped like honey-coated poison. Are you sure you should be working such long hours in your condition? Mark squeezed my hand under the table. Mom, Rose knows her limits. Of course she does. Helen smiled, passing the roast. Though I was reading just the other day about how stress during pregnancy can affect the baby's development. Emily, you remember Emily from church? Was telling me about her sister's terrible experience. There it was. Emily. My fork scraped against the plate, the sound sharp enough to make George glance up from his meal. I don't believe we've met Emily, I said, keeping my voice steady. Perhaps you should invite her to dinner sometime. Helen's eyes flickered with something: surprise? Appreciation? Before she recovered. What a lovely idea. Mark, you remember Emily Carter? She used to babysit for the Hendersons. Vaguely, Mark said, reaching for his wine. Wasn't she the one who went to business school? Harvard Master of Business Administration, Helen beamed. And still single, can you believe it? Such a shame when career women wait too long to start families. My baby kicked, as if recognizing the threat in Helen's words. I pressed my hand against my stomach, drawing strength from the movement. Speaking of careers, George interrupted. Rose, how's that new project going? The one with the sustainable energy company? Before I could answer, Helen cut in. Oh, but surely you'll be taking a step back soon? The Mitchell men have always had stay-at-home wives. It's tradition. Times change, Mother, Mark said, but his tone was light, dismissive. He didn't hear the steel beneath her words, the way each comment was designed to chip away at my place in this family. Some things shouldn't. Helen dabbed her lips with her napkin. Family should always come first. Don't you agree, Rose? I met her gaze across the table. Absolutely. Family is everything. George cleared his throat, an oddly knowing look in his eyes. Helen, perhaps we could discuss something else? Of course, dear. She turned to Mark. Oh, before I forget, the country club is hosting a charity gala next weekend. I took the liberty of getting tickets for you both. Mom, you know Rose has that conference in Boston next weekend. Does she? Helen's surprise was perfectly crafted. But surely she can reschedule? The gala's such an important networking event for your career, Mark. And Emily will be there, she's on the planning committee. She could introduce you to some valuable contacts. The room tilted slightly. I gripped my water glass, watching condensation bead against my fingers. Helen hadn't just been plotting, she'd been orchestrating, creating opportunities, laying groundwork. Actually, I heard myself say, I can probably move some things around. Helen's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Really? But your work is so important to you. Not as important as family. I smiled, matching her saccharine tone. And you're right, networking is crucial. I'd love to meet Emily properly. Something shifted in Helen's expression, a flash of uncertainty, quickly masked. She hadn't expected me to adapt to her game so quickly. Wonderful! Mark grinned, oblivious to the undercurrent. It'll be fun to get dressed up, show off my beautiful wife. As the conversation moved on, I caught George watching me with an odd expression. He'd been unusually quiet tonight, observing rather than participating. When Helen rose to fetch dessert, he leaned slightly toward me. Be careful, he murmured, so softly I almost missed it. She's better at this game than you know. Before I could respond, Helen returned with an elaborate chocolate torte. Rose, you must try this, though perhaps just a small piece? You're carrying rather high, and we wouldn't want you to get any more swollen than necessary. I accepted the slice with a smile, my mind already racing ahead. Helen might be better at this game, but I had something she didn't, nothing left to lose. The email sat in my inbox like a loaded gun. 3 clients canceling major contracts within 24 hours, it couldn't be coincidence. I scrolled through their politely worded excuses, each mentioning concerns about reliability and heard through industry channels. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark, Mom says you missed lunch with her friend Sandra yesterday. Everything okay? Sandra. Head of the engineering consortium. Who just happened to be one of Helen's oldest friends. I pressed my palm against my desk until it hurt, fighting the urge to scream. 6 years building my reputation, gone in a whisper campaign orchestrated over cucumber sandwiches and bridge club meetings. In a meeting, I texted back. Talk later. My computer pinged. Another email, this time from my biggest client, regarding our upcoming project. The phone rang. Mark again. I let it go to voicemail, unable to trust my voice. He'd want explanations I couldn't give without sounding paranoid. How do you tell someone their mother is systematically destroying your life? A knock at my home office door made me jump. Rose? George's voice, unexpected and hesitant. Have a minute? I quickly minimized the emails. Come in. He entered, looking uncomfortable in the modern space. Helen mentioned you weren't at lunch yesterday. Said Sandra was quite disappointed. Did she? My laugh sounded hollow. Funny, since I was never invited. George's expression shifted. Ah. He settled into the chair across from my desk, studying me with those quiet teacher's eyes. You know, Helen's always been good at stories. Telling them, shaping them. Making them real. Is that what we're calling it now? Stories? What would you call it? I turned my monitor toward him, displaying the cascade of cancellation emails. I'd call it character assassination. He leaned forward, reading quickly. His face aged 10 years in 30 seconds. Christ, Rose. I knew she was. But this. She's trying to make me desperate. Financially dependent. I rested a hand on my swollen belly. Vulnerable. Have you told Mark? What would I say? Your mother's systematically destroying my career because she wants to replace me with Emily? He'd think pregnancy hormones were making me crazy. I laughed again. The sound edged with hysteria. Which is exactly what she wants. George was quiet for a long moment. Helen wasn't always like this. Or maybe she was, and I just didn't want to see it. But after Mark was born, he trailed off, looking older than I'd ever seen him. She has a way of making her reality everyone else's reality. My phone buzzed again. Helen this time, darling, just checking you're still coming to the gala. Emily's so looking forward to meeting you properly. I showed George the message. She's not even trying to hide it anymore. Because she thinks she's already won. He stood suddenly. I should go. Helen will wonder where I am. George? He paused at the door. Why did you really come here today? He turned back, his expression haunted. Because 35 years ago, there was another woman. Someone I loved before Helen. And sometimes I wonder what my life would have been if I'd been brave enough to see the truth sooner. After he left, I sat in my darkening office, his words echoing in my head. The baby kicked, a sharp reminder of everything at stake. I opened my laptop and began typing. Dear Mark, there's something you need to know about your mother. I stared at the words, cursor blinking accusingly. Delete. Helen would make any direct accusation sound like the ravings of an unstable pregnant woman. I needed proof. Real proof. My phone buzzed one final time. An email from Sandra herself. Rose, dear, so sorry you couldn't make lunch. Helen mentioned you've been struggling with the pregnancy. Perhaps it's time to consider stepping back? I know several young engineers who could handle your clients. I closed my eyes, feeling the pieces click into place. Helen hadn't just been planning this for weeks or months. This was years of groundwork, relationships cultivated, stories planted, all leading to this moment. Fine. If Helen wanted to play the long game, I could play too. But first, I had a gala to prepare for. The country club bathroom mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. Designer dress stretched over my growing belly, pearls at my throat, Helen's idea of proper Mitchell family attire. My hands trembled as I reapplied lipstick, smearing it slightly. You look beautiful. Emily Carter materialized beside me, perfect in midnight blue. Helen showed me your wedding photos. You were radiant. I met her eyes in the mirror. Were? Oh, I didn't mean. She touched my arm, concern radiating from her like expensive perfume. Pregnancy can be so difficult. Especially when you're trying to balance everything else. The bathroom door opened. Helen swept in, resplendent in silver. There you are. Mark's looking for you, Rose. Something about a phone call from Sandra? My stomach clenched. I should go find him. Let me help you with your lipstick first. Helen produced a tissue, dabbing at the smear with maternal precision. We want you looking your best. So many important people here tonight. I escaped into the hallway, heart pounding. The gala's music throbbed through the walls, a counterpoint to my racing pulse. Mark stood by the bar, phone in hand, frowning. Sandra called the house, he said without preamble. Something about you missing meetings? Client complaints? It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. His voice held an edge I'd never heard before. Because Mom's friends keep asking if you're okay, if the pregnancy's affecting your work, if maybe you're overwhelmed. A waiter passed with champagne. Mark grabbed 2 glasses, handed me sparkling water instead. The gesture, so casual, so controlling, made something snap inside me. Did you ever wonder, I said quietly, why your mother's friends are so interested in my career? What's that supposed to mean? It means, I stopped as George appeared, his face grave. Rose, a moment? He glanced at Mark. Alone, if you don't mind. Mark threw up his hands. Perfect. More secrets. George led me to a quiet corner. Helen's been busy. Board positions, charity committees, she's been positioning Emily for months. Creating opportunities. I know. No, you don't. He pulled out his phone, showed me an email. She's arranged for Emily to take over your biggest remaining client. The contract's already drawn up. The room tilted. I gripped the wall, feeling the rough texture of expensive wallpaper under my fingers. There's more, George continued. She's been talking to divorce lawyers. Gathering evidence of your unstable behavior during pregnancy. Building a case for Mark to get full custody when the baby comes. The pieces clicked into horrible place. Helen wasn't just trying to replace me, she was trying to erase me completely. Across the room, I saw Helen introducing Emily to Mark's business associates. Her hand on Emily's back, proprietary and proud. The perfect future daughter-in-law, already being woven into the fabric of Mark's life. I should have warned you sooner, George said. But Helen. She has a way of making you doubt what you see. What you know. Why tell me now? Because I saw the guest list for next month's baby shower. Emily's not just invited, she's helping Helen host it. He touched my arm gently. Whatever you're planning, do it soon. Before it's too late. The baby kicked hard, making me gasp. Through the crowd, I caught Helen watching us, her expression calculating. She raised her glass in a mock toast. Rose? Mark appeared beside me. Mom wants us all for photos. Family tradition, you know. Family tradition. Everything in its proper place, according to Helen's design. I looked at Mark, my husband, the father of my child, and saw him through new eyes. Not just Helen's son anymore, but a piece in her elaborate game. Coming, I said, straightening my spine. Wouldn't want to disappoint your mother. I followed Mark toward the group, where Helen stood arranging everyone just so, Emily at her right hand. My baby kicked again, a reminder of everything at stake. Time to stop playing defense. Helen wanted a war? Fine. But she'd forgotten something crucial. In chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. And I was done being a pawn. The flash drive felt heavy in my palm, a tiny thing to contain so much destruction. 3 weeks of digging through Helen's carefully constructed world had yielded a treasure trove of emails, financial records, and recorded conversations. Each piece a bullet in my loaded gun. You understand what this means? George asked, his voice barely above a whisper in his study. Helen was at her bridge club, orchestrating more social destruction. If you use this, there's no going back. I plugged the drive into his laptop. Folders appeared, each labeled with meticulous precision: career sabotage, Emily arrangements, custody preparation. She's been planning this for years, I said, clicking through documents. Look, she started grooming Emily back when Mark and I were still dating. George's hand shook as he reached for his scotch. There's something else you should see. He opened a folder labeled previous incidents. My throat went dry. 3 other women. All former girlfriends of Mark's. All driven away through carefully orchestrated campaigns of destruction. I knew about Caroline, George said. But the others. Christ, I should have seen it. A new email notification popped up. From Helen to Emily, darling, everything's arranged for the baby shower. Rose won't suspect a thing until it's too late. What's she planning? My voice sounded strange, distant. Does it matter? George closed the laptop. You have enough here to expose everything. The baby kicked hard, making me wince. And destroy Mark in the process. This would ruin his career, his reputation. He deserves to know the truth. Does he? I stood, pacing the study. Helen spent 40 years molding him, controlling every aspect of his life. What if? What if knowing destroys him? George's expression hardened. Then maybe he needs to be destroyed. To be rebuilt into something real. My phone buzzed. Mark, Mom's worried about you. Says you've been acting strange. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Phillips? Another buzz. Helen, just checking on you, darling. Emily mentioned seeing you leave Sandra's office yesterday. Everything okay with work? Final buzz. Emily, we should have coffee soon. I have some concerns about Helen I'd like to discuss. I laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. She's playing us all against each other. Like puppets on strings. Then cut the strings. George pulled out a manila envelope. These are copies of everything. Bank records, emails, recordings. All the evidence of Helen's manipulations. Use it. It's not that simple. It is. He stood, suddenly looking every bit the teacher he used to be. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore. That baby deserves better than growing up under Helen's control. The baby kicked again, harder this time. As if agreeing. My phone lit up with another text from Mark. Mom suggested we meet with her lawyer tomorrow. Just to discuss some family estate planning. Estate planning. Code for custody arrangements. If I do this, I said slowly, I'll need your help. And it has to be perfect. One mistake and Helen will turn it all against me. George nodded, reaching for the flash drive. Then let's make sure there are no mistakes. I grabbed his wrist, stopping him. Wait. There's something else we need first. I pulled out my own phone, typing quickly, Emily, coffee sounds perfect. Tomorrow? Playing her game? George asked. No. I touched my belly, feeling my child move beneath my hand. Playing my own. Helen thinks she's the only one who can manipulate people? Fine. Let's see how she handles being outplayed at her own game. My phone buzzed one last time. Emily, tomorrow's perfect. There's so much we need to discuss. I smiled, feeling the pieces of my own plan clicking into place. Helen had spent years building her web of manipulation. Now it was time to turn those threads against her. One more thing, I told George. After tomorrow, whatever happens. There's no going back. He nodded gravely. Some things shouldn't go back. They should burn. The Mitchell family dining room had never felt so suffocating. Every piece of evidence lay spread across Helen's prized mahogany table, emails, photos, financial records. A lifetime of manipulation laid bare under the crystal chandelier. Mark stood at the window, his back to us all. He hadn't moved since I'd finished speaking 10 minutes ago. It's all lies, Helen said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. Rose is clearly suffering from prenatal depression. The doctors warned us about this, remember, darling? Emily shifted in her chair, avoiding everyone's eyes. The recording of her conversation with Helen about the custody arrangements played softly from my phone, filling the silence. Mark, I said, my voice cracking. Please. Say something. He turned, but his eyes went to Helen. Mom? Just that one word, but it held everything, doubt, confusion, plea for denial. Helen saw her opening and pounced. Sweetheart, you know how I've worried about Rose's stability. She reached for his hand. Everything I've done has been to protect you, to protect our family. By destroying 3 other women before me? I pushed forward Caroline's old letters. By planning to take my baby? Mark, she's hysterical, Helen said. This is exactly what I've been warning you about. Stop. George's voice cut through the room. Helen, for once in your life, stop. George, dear, surely you don't believe. I found the divorce papers, he said quietly. The ones you had drawn up for Mark. Dated 3 months after Rose announced her pregnancy. Mark finally looked at the evidence, picking up emails one by one. His hands shook. Emily. You were supposed to replace Rose? I'm sorry, Emily whispered. Helen said it was for the best. That Rose was unstable, that the baby would be safer. The baby kicked hard, making me gasp. Mark's head snapped up at the sound, real fear crossing his face for the first time. The nursery, he said suddenly. Last week, when you were reorganizing. Mom, what did you do? Helen's mask slipped, just slightly. I was only trying to help. Mark bolted from the room. I followed as quickly as my pregnant body would allow, hearing the others close behind. He threw open the nursery door and stopped dead. Everything was gone. The crib, the decorations, all our careful preparations, replaced with Helen's choices. Emily's favorite colors. Helen's approved furniture. It's better this way, Helen said from behind us. More appropriate for a Mitchell heir. Rose never quite understood our family's standards. Get out. Mark's voice was barely a whisper. Darling. Get out. He whirled on her, face contorted. Both of you. Emily, Helen, get out of my house. Mark Mitchell, you will not speak to me that way. Helen drew herself up. Everything I've done has been for you. Rose isn't right for this family. She'll never understand our values, our traditions. Your traditions? I laughed, the sound bordering on hysteria. Like destroying anyone who threatens your control? Control? Mark turned to me, his expression horrifying in its sudden clarity. No. Not control. Ownership. She wants to own everything. Including me. Helen stepped forward, reaching for him. Mark. Don't touch me. He backed away. I can't. I need to think. I need. He pushed past us all, footsteps pounding down the stairs. The front door slammed. Well done, Rose. Helen's voice dripped venom. You've finally managed to drive him away. Just like I knew you would. Helen, George warned. Oh, save it, George. You're as weak as he is. She smiled at me, triumphant despite everything. He'll be back. He always comes back to Mother. And when he does. My water broke. The pain doubled me over, shocking in its intensity. Too early. A month too early. Rose. George caught me as my knees buckled. Helen's smile widened. Perfect timing. Emily, call Dr. Phillips. Tell him we're bringing Rose in. And that she's experiencing another emotional episode. No, I gasped. George, don't let her. SHH, dear, Helen soothed, already pulling out her phone. Mother knows best. And soon, everything will be exactly as it should be. The last thing I saw before the pain overwhelmed me was Helen's face, serene and victorious, as she dialed Mark's number. Hospital fluorescent lights cast everyone in sickly shades of truth. Helen stood at the nurse's station, her perfectly manicured hands gesturing as she spoke in urgent whispers. Dr. Phillips nodded, concern etched on his face. She's been increasingly unstable, Helen's voice drifted over. We're worried about the baby. Another contraction ripped through me. George squeezed my hand, his face grim. Rose? Mark burst through the emergency room doors, wild-eyed. What happened? Mom said. Of course she did. I gritted my teeth through the pain. Did she tell you about the papers she's filing? The ones claiming I'm an unfit mother? His face went blank. What? Mark, darling. Helen glided over, Dr. Phillips in tow. Rose is having another episode. The stress isn't good for the baby. The only stress, George's voice cut through the room like a blade, is you, Helen. She froze. In 15 years of marriage, I'd never seen George directly challenge her. I'm leaving you, he continued, pulling papers from his jacket. And I've already submitted evidence of your manipulation to the hospital board. They know exactly who's causing Rose's stress. Dr. Phillips' expression shifted. Helen saw it, her mask cracking slightly. George, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. He turned to Mark. Your mother had Dr. Phillips ready to declare Rose mentally unstable. Part of her plan to help you get custody after the birth. Mark staggered back. Mom? Everything I did was for you, Helen snapped, mask finally shattering. Rose will never understand our family, our legacy. She'll poison our grandchild against everything we stand for. Like you poisoned me? Mark's voice was barely a whisper. Like you poisoned those other women? I protected you. You owned me. He moved to my bedside, taking my other hand. But not anymore. Helen's face contorted. You ungrateful. Security, Dr. Phillips called quietly. Please escort Mrs. Mitchell out. You can't do this. Helen backed away as two guards approached. I'm his mother. I'm the only one who truly loves. Love? I pushed myself up, fighting through another contraction. Love doesn't destroy. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't try to steal someone's child. You know nothing about love. She lunged forward, but the guards caught her arms. Mark, please. Everything I did was for you. No. Mark's voice was steel. Everything you did was for control. And you've just lost it all. Emily appeared in the doorway, holding a familiar flash drive. Helen? The board would like to see you. Something about years of falsified medical records and coerced testimonies? Helen's face went ash white. You little traitor. I made you. You tried to make me into you, Emily said quietly. That's why I helped Rose. Because I saw what I could become. The guards began pulling Helen toward the door. She thrashed, her carefully constructed dignity finally shattering completely. Mark! You can't let them do this. I'm your mother. Not anymore, he said, not looking at her. Rose needs to push now. Helen's screams echoed down the hallway as another contraction seized me. Through the pain, I saw George following the guards, divorce papers in hand. One more thing, he called after Helen. The house is in my name. You have until tomorrow to clear out. Hours later, holding our daughter, I watched Mark's face as he counted her tiny fingers. I'm sorry, he whispered. For not seeing it sooner. For almost letting her. SHH. I touched his cheek. We're free now. All of us. Emily knocked softly, entering with George. The board's reviewing everything. Helen's medical license connections, her social circle influence. It's all crumbling. Good, George said firmly. Some things need to crumble before they can be rebuilt. Through the window, dawn painted the sky in new colors. Our daughter stirred, opening eyes that held nothing of Helen's manipulation, nothing of the darkness we'd fought through. What's her name? Emily asked softly. Mark and I exchanged glances. Hope, I said finally. Because that's what survived. What Helen could never quite destroy. George smiled, touching his granddaughter's hand. Hope Mitchell. A new legacy, built on truth instead of control. Outside, the sun rose fully, washing away the last shadows of Helen's reign. Hope's laughter echoed through the renovated nursery as she reached for the mobile spinning above her crib, butterflies instead of Helen's chosen angels. The sound still caught me off guard sometimes, so pure and untouched by all that came before. "She's getting stronger every day," Emily said from the doorway. She'd stopped by to drop off the last of Helen's court documents. "Just like her mother." I adjusted Hope's blanket, handmade by George. "Any word?" "She's living with her sister in Arizona. The medical board revoked her licenses. Most of her society friends have quietly distanced themselves." Emily moved closer, watching Hope. "Though some people say she's already trying to rebuild her influence there." "Of course she is." I wasn't surprised. People like Helen didn't change, they just found new territories to conquer. "Rose?" Mark's voice from downstairs. "Sandra's here." I found them in the kitchen, Sandra looking uncomfortable but determined. "I owe you an apology," she said before I could speak. "I let Helen manipulate me into hurting your career. I've already called my contacts to set the record straight." "Thank you." I studied her face, seeing the lingering shame there. How many others did she use like that over the years? Too many. Sandra glanced at Mark. "We all thought we were protecting the Mitchell family legacy. We never realized we were just enabling her control." Mark squeezed my hand. The gesture felt different now, not seeking reassurance, but offering strength. "The legacy needed breaking," he said quietly. "So we could build something real." George entered through the back door, carrying fresh vegetables from his new garden. The house felt different with him here, warmer somehow. He'd taken over the guest house after the divorce, helping us rebuild while healing himself. "Emily," he nodded. "Staying for dinner?" "Actually." She hesitated. "I'm leaving town. Got a job offer in Seattle." "Running away?" I asked. "Moving forward." She smiled slightly. "Helen showed me what I could become. You showed me what I should be instead." Hope's cry from the nursery pulled me away. When I returned with her, Sandra was gone, but Emily lingered. "There's something else you should know," she said, watching Hope reach for Mark's finger. "Helen called me last week. Offered to mentor me again if I helped her reconnect with Mark." The old fear flickered, but Mark's laugh dispersed it. "Let me guess, you recorded the conversation?" "Added it to the file." Emily touched Hope's cheek gently. "Just in case she ever tries coming back." After everyone left, I found George in his garden, tending new growth where Helen's prized roses once dominated. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked. "Exposing everything? Losing the life you had?" He looked up, soil staining his hands. "That life was built on lies. This one." He gestured to the fresh vegetables, the sound of Hope's laughter drifting from the house. "This one's real." Later, putting Hope to bed, I noticed something in her crib, a small angel figurine from Helen's old mobile. Mark found me staring at it. "Mom sent it," he said quietly. "With a note saying she's sorry, that she wants to meet her granddaughter." "What do you want to do?" He took the figurine, studying it. "Keep it. To remind us. Of what she did. Of what we survived. What we chose not to become." He placed the angel on a high shelf, just visible from Hope's crib. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's building something they can never touch. I watched Hope drift off to sleep, one tiny hand curled around her butterfly mobile. The angel watched from its shelf, a reminder that darkness doesn't always stay banished. But as Mark's arms wrapped around me, I realized that maybe that's okay. Some battles don't end with complete victory. Some wounds don't heal perfectly clean. But here, in this moment, with Hope's peaceful breathing and Mark's steady presence, I understood something Helen never could. Real love doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true. The butterfly mobile turned gently in the evening breeze, casting shifting shadows that looked, just briefly, like angels' wings.
The letter trembled in my hands, its crisp edges mocking my shattered dreams. We are pleased to offer you admission to Harvard Business School. I didn't bother reading further before ripping it into tiny pieces, watching them scatter across my desk like expensive confetti. My mother's voice still rang in my ears from our phone call 10 minutes ago. Josephine, darling, we need to discuss something important. Your father and I have decided to invest everything into Evelyn's wedding. It's going to be the social event of the season. I'm Joe. Just Joe. The invisible daughter who spent the last 4 years climbing the corporate ladder at Morgan Stanley while perfect Evelyn fluttered from one expensive hobby to another. But Mom, what about my Master of Business Administration? You promised. Oh honey, you're doing fine at your job. Evelyn needs this. Daniel's family expects a certain standard. You understand, don't you? I understood perfectly. I always had. My phone buzzed again, probably another excited message from Evelyn about her 12-tiered wedding cake or custom-designed dress. I let it go to voicemail. Carter. Paul's voice cut through my thoughts. He stood at my office door, concern etched on his face. You okay? You look like you're planning someone's murder. Just my sister's wedding, I muttered, sweeping the torn acceptance letter into my trash bin. Ah, the famous Evelyn's big day. How many horses are pulling her carriage now? 8. Apparently, 6 wasn't enough for the future Mrs. Daniel Reed. Paul whistled low. That's excessive. That's Evelyn. I forced a smile. Hey, want to hear something funny? Remember that Master of Business Administration program I've been killing myself to get into? Harvard. Did you get in? Doesn't matter anymore. Mom and Dad just pulled my funding. Every penny's going to Evelyn's fairy tale wedding. Paul's expression darkened. They can't do that to you. They just did. I stood up, straightening my blazer. 26 years of being the responsible one, the steady one, the one who never asked for anything. And this is what I get. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Grandfather Henry. Unlike my parents, he'd always seen me, really seen me. Hey, Grandpa. Your mother called me, Pumpkin. Told me about their decision. I swallowed hard. It's fine. I'll figure something out. No, it's not fine. His voice carried that steel I'd always admired. Come to dinner tonight. Martha and I need to discuss something with you. After hanging up, I caught my reflection in the office window. Something had changed in my eyes, a hardness I'd never noticed before. Paul was still watching me. What are you going to do? I picked up a family photo from my desk, Mom, Dad, and Evelyn beaming at some charity gala. I wasn't in it. I'd been working late that night, as usual. You know what the funny thing is? I placed the photo face down. Daniel Reed isn't who everyone thinks he is. I've seen things, heard things. He's using Evelyn to get to Dad's business connections. Joe. Don't worry, Paul. I'm not going to do anything crazy. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. I'm just going to sit back and watch while karma does its job. And maybe help karma along a little bit. The market reports on my screen blurred as I thought about my grandparents' dinner invitation. They'd always been different, always supported me, believed in me. Maybe they had a plan. Or maybe they just wanted to comfort their disappointed granddaughter. Either way, I had decisions to make. Big ones. My phone buzzed one more time, a text from Evelyn, "OMG sis. Wait till you see my tiara. Cost more than your yearly bonus. Face blowing a kiss." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and started researching Daniel Reed's business history. If my family wanted to bet everything on Evelyn's perfect wedding, they should at least know what kind of man they were betting on. Sometimes revenge doesn't need to be loud. Sometimes it just needs to be right. My grandparents' Victorian mansion loomed before me, its familiar warmth a stark contrast to the ice forming in my chest. Through the window, I could see them waiting, Grandfather Henry in his leather armchair, Grandmother Martha arranging teacups with military precision. The door opened before I could knock. "There's my warrior," Grandfather said, pulling me into a bear hug that smelled of pipe tobacco and old books. "I brought wine," I said, holding up the bottle. "Figured we might need it." "Oh, we'll need something stronger than that." Grandmother's eyes glinted with that sharp intelligence I'd inherited. "Your mother called again. She's hosting a small engagement dinner next week. Only 200 guests." I sank into my usual spot on their velvet sofa. "Let me guess, I'm expected to attend." "And contribute to the wedding fund," Grandfather added, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Robert seems to have forgotten who built that company he's so proud of." The tea service clinked as Grandmother poured. "Your father called the bank today, trying to access your trust fund." My head snapped up. "What?" "Don't worry," Grandfather said. "I made sure that money stayed where it belongs, with you. Though Robert seems to think Evelyn's wedding is a family emergency worthy of breaking the terms." A knock at the door interrupted us. Through the frosted glass, I recognized my father's silhouette. "Speaking of the devil," Grandmother muttered, straightening her spine. "Henry, perhaps it's time." "Not yet, Martha. Let's see how this plays out." The door opened, and Robert Carter strode in, all Brooks Brothers suit and corporate authority. "Father, we need to discuss." He stopped short at the sight of me. "Josephine. What are you doing here?" "Having tea with my grandparents." "Or is that being redistributed to Evelyn too?" "Your attitude isn't helping matters." He loosened his tie. "We're trying to secure Evelyn's future." "The Reeds are." "Are what, Dad? Rich? Connected? Or just better than us Carters?" "Daniel Reed represents opportunities that could transform our family's position in." "Your family's position," I corrected. "I'm just the backup daughter, remember?" Grandfather cleared his throat. "Robert, perhaps you should know something about Daniel Reed's company." "I've done my due diligence, Father. Unlike some people, I understand the importance of proper vetting." My phone buzzed, a text from Paul, "Found something about Reed. Call me ASAP." "Did you know," I said carefully, "that Daniel's last 3 business ventures ended in bankruptcy? Or that his current company is hemorrhaging money?" Father's face reddened. "Those are complex business situations you couldn't possibly understand." "I work in financial analysis, Dad. Understanding complex business situations is literally my job. A job you wouldn't have without our name opening doors. A name I earned by graduating top of my class while Evelyn was busy planning charity galas." Grandmother set down her teacup with a sharp clink. "Robert, that's enough. Joe has earned everything she has. Maybe if you spent less time planning weddings and more time looking at your company's books." "Martha," Grandfather warned, but his eyes were calculating. Father straightened his jacket. "The engagement dinner is next Thursday at 7. Wear something appropriate, Josephine. And try to look happy for your sister." After he left, I slumped back into the sofa. He didn't even ask about Harvard. "No," Grandfather said softly. "But we did. He exchanged a look with grandmother. We have a proposition for you, Joe. One that might solve several problems at once. My phone buzzed again, another text from Paul. Reed's company isn't just failing. It's a front. You need to see these documents. Grandmother reached for a folder on the side table. Before we show you this, you need to understand something. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's about becoming powerful enough that they can't ignore you anymore. I thought about the torn acceptance letter in my office trash can, about years of being overlooked, about Daniel Reed's suspicious perfect timing. I'm listening, I said, and watched my grandparents smile like chess masters about to reveal their winning move. The documents scattered across my desk painted an ugly picture. Shell companies, fake investors, borrowed names. Daniel Reed's business empire was built on sand and lies. Paul sat across from me, his tie loosened, watching as I processed each damning detail. The timing's perfect, he said. He's burning through cash, needs a fresh injection of capital. And along comes my sister. Complete with our family's business connections. My fingers traced the edge of a particularly incriminating bank statement. Did you verify these sources? Triple-checked. Your friend at the SEC came through. Reed's company is 3 months away from total collapse. I leaned back, remembering last night's dinner with my grandparents. Their proposition still rang in my ears. Take over the company, Joe. We'll back you completely. My phone lit up, Evelyn calling. I let it ring. You're not going to tell her? Paul asked. Not yet. I need to. The office door burst open. Evelyn swept in, a vision in designer white, trailing the scent of expensive perfume. Why aren't you answering your phone? I've been trying to reach you all morning. I swept the documents into a folder. Working. Some of us still do that. Don't be bitter, it doesn't suit you. She perched on my desk, oblivious to the papers she was crushing. Daniel's throwing an engagement dinner tonight. Last-minute thing at Le Bernardin. You have to come. Have to. Mother insists. Besides, she lowered her voice, Daniel specifically asked for you to be there. He says you two got off on the wrong foot. Paul caught my eye. I kept my face neutral. Did he now? He wants to make things right. Show you he's worthy of being part of the family. She grabbed my hands. Please, Joe. For me. The irony of her begging almost made me laugh. Instead, I squeezed her hands back. What time? 8 o'clock. Where's something nice? She kissed my cheek and floated out, leaving behind a wake of expensive scent and ignored warning signs. Paul waited until her clicks faded. He knows we're onto him. Of course he does. I pulled out the folder again. The question is, what's his play? It's a trap. Obviously. I smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. The question is, whose trap? That evening, Le Bernardin's private dining room felt like a stage set for a particularly vicious play. Daniel held court at the head of the table, my parents hanging on his every word. Evelyn sat beside him, glowing with practiced radiance. Joe, Daniel rose as I approached. I saved you a seat right here. He gestured to the chair beside him, not next to Evelyn, but on his other side. I sat, noting how he'd positioned me, back to the wall, away from the exits. Amateur. I hear you've been asking about my business ventures, he said softly, while the others chatted. Quite thoroughly, in fact. Just looking out for my sister's interests. Are you? His smile never reached his eyes. Or are you just bitter that Mommy and Daddy finally chose their favorite? My wine glass froze halfway to my lips. Careful, Daniel. You're showing your cards. So are you. He leaned closer. I know about your little investigation. But here's what you don't know, your father's company. It's not as stable as everyone thinks. One wrong move, one whisper of scandal. Well, you're the financial analyst. You do the math. The threat hung between us like poison. You'd destroy my whole family just to save yourself. I'd do whatever it takes to win. His perfect smile returned as he raised his voice. Everyone. I'd like to make a toast. The table fell silent. My phone buzzed, a text from Grandfather Henry, remember what we discussed. Sometimes the best revenge is patience. Daniel stood, champagne glass glinting. To family. To love. And to new beginnings. I raised my glass with the others, mind racing. Daniel thought he had me cornered, but he'd forgotten something crucial. I'd spent my whole life being underestimated by people exactly like him. Let him think he'd won. Let him believe I'd back down to protect my family. After all, the best traps are the ones your target walks into willingly. The city lights blurred through the taxi window as Paul and I left another late strategy session at the office. 3 days had passed since Daniel's veiled threat at Le Bernardin, and sleep had become a distant memory. You're sure about these offshore accounts? I asked, reviewing the documents on my phone. Positive. But Joe. Paul hesitated. If we expose this, your father's company takes a hit too. The connections run deep. The taxi stopped at a red light, casting a crimson glow across our faces. My grandparents think we should wait, build a stronger case. And what do you think? Before I could answer, my phone rang, Evelyn. I almost ignored it until I saw her follow-up text, emergency. Please. I found her sitting on the steps of our childhood home, mascara streaked down her face. She looked up as I approached, suddenly appearing much younger than her 24 years. I wasn't sure you'd come, she whispered. I'm still your sister. I sat beside her, our shoulders touching. What happened? I found something in Daniel's study. Papers, phone records. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking. He's been talking to Father's board members. Private meetings, secret deals. I thought he was just being supportive, but... My throat tightened. There's more, isn't there? I overheard him on the phone. He said. She swallowed hard. He said once we're married, he'll have enough leverage to force a merger. Something about hostile takeover provisions. The pieces clicked into place. Daniel wasn't just after connections, he was orchestrating a corporate raid, using Evelyn as his Trojan horse. Why didn't you tell Mother and Father? Evelyn's laugh was bitter. I tried. Mother said I was being dramatic. Father said I couldn't possibly understand complex business matters. Sounds familiar. I'm sorry, Joe. She turned to me, eyes glistening. I never realized. All these years, when they dismissed you. Don't. I stood up abruptly. This isn't about that. My phone buzzed, a text from Grandfather Henry, board meeting tomorrow. Daniel's making his move early. Be ready. What are you going to do? Evelyn asked. The question hung in the air as another car pulled up. Daniel stepped out, his perfect smile faltering when he saw us. Darling, I've been looking everywhere for you. He climbed the steps, placing a possessive hand on Evelyn's shoulder. Your mother's worried sick. Is she? I asked. Or is the board meeting tomorrow making you nervous? His smile tightened. I see you've been busy. So have you. Those offshore accounts must take a lot of maintenance. Careful, Josephine. His voice dropped to a whisper. Remember our conversation about family loyalty? Funny you should mention loyalty. I pulled out my phone, showing him the documents Paul had uncovered. These show quite a different story. Daniel's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. You really want to play this game? I own half your father's board already. One word from me. Daniel? Evelyn's voice cracked. What's he talking about? He recovered quickly, reaching for her hand. Business matters, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. That's your mistake, I said quietly. You underestimate her, just like everyone else does. But Evelyn's smarter than you think. Aren't you, sis? Evelyn pulled her hand away from Daniel, standing up straighter. I found the papers in your study. I know what you're planning. The facade cracked completely. Daniel's face contorted with rage, but before he could speak, another car approached, my grandparents' Bentley. Perfect timing, I said. Shall we discuss those business matters now? All of us. Daniel's eyes darted between us, calculating odds and exits. This isn't over. No, I agreed, watching him retreat to his car. It's just beginning. Evelyn touched my arm. Joe, I'm scared. What happens now? I thought about the Harvard acceptance letter, about years of being overlooked, about Daniel's threats and my father's blindness. Now we show them exactly what the Carter sisters can do when we work together. The Bentley's doors opened, and I saw determination in my grandparents' faces that matched my own. Tomorrow's board meeting wouldn't go quite as Daniel planned. Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold, it's served as a family. The boardroom felt like a pressure cooker, with Daniel seated at one end and my father at the other. I sat between my grandparents, watching the power play unfold through the steam of my untouched coffee. The merger proposal is sound, Daniel was saying, his confidence unwavering. Carter Industries needs this injection of fresh capital and new leadership. Fresh capital. Grandfather Henry's voice cut through the murmurs. Like the capital you've been channeling through those offshore accounts. Daniel's smile flickered. I'm not sure what you're implying. Show them, I said quietly, sliding the folders across the polished table. Show them exactly what kind of leadership you're offering. My father snatched the documents, his face darkening as he read. These allegations are true, Evelyn's voice rang out as she entered the room. Mother trailed behind her, looking confused and angry. Evelyn, darling, Daniel stood, this isn't the place. It's exactly the place. She moved to stand beside me. Tell them about the hostile takeover provisions, Daniel. Tell them how you plan to use our marriage to seize control. The board members began whispering among themselves. I watched my father's face transition from confusion to rage. Robert, my mother touched his arm, surely this is just a misunderstanding. Is it? I pulled out my phone, playing the recording Paul had helped me secure. Daniel's voice filled the room, discussing his plans with one of his conspirators. The color drained from Daniel's face. This is a setup. Robert, you know me. Do we? Grandfather stood slowly. Because our investigation shows your company is 3 months from bankruptcy. Your last 3 ventures ended in fraud investigations. And now you're targeting our family. Your family. Daniel laughed, a harsh sound. You mean the family that throws away talent like garbage? That ignores their own daughter's potential while throwing millions at a wedding? He turned to my father. You never even read Joe's business proposals, did you? Too busy planning Evelyn's perfect life. The room fell silent. My father wouldn't meet my eyes. That's enough, Mother said sharply. This is hardly the time. When is the time? I stood, hands flat on the table. When Daniel destroys the company. When Evelyn's life is ruined. When does this family finally wake up? Joe, Paul appeared at the door, tablet in hand. The SEC just confirmed. They're opening an investigation into Reed's companies. Daniel's composure cracked completely. You think you've won? This company's already compromised. Half the board signed deals. Invalid deals, Grandmother Martha interrupted, producing another set of documents. Made under false pretenses. Our lawyers are quite clear on that point. The board members began distancing themselves from Daniel, but I barely noticed. I was watching my father, seeing him truly look at me for the first time in years. You did all this? He asked quietly. Put together the investigation, tracked the fraud. She did more than that, Grandfather said. She developed a complete restructuring plan for the company. The one you dismissed without reading last year. Daniel made a move toward the door, but security was already there. As they led him out, he caught my eye. You'll regret this. All of you. No, Evelyn said firmly. The only thing I regret is not seeing you for what you are sooner. She turned to me. Thank you, Joe. For everything. The boardroom slowly emptied, leaving just our family. Mother sat heavily in a chair, while Father stared out the window. The Harvard acceptance, he said finally. You really earned that on your own. She earned everything on her own, Grandmother said. Maybe it's time you both saw that. My phone buzzed, a message from Paul, SEC wants to meet. Ready to finish this? I looked at my family, Evelyn's grateful smile, my parents' dawning realization, my grandparents' proud expressions. The revenge I'd wanted had transformed into something else, a chance to rebuild, to prove myself, to change the family's future. Yes, I texted back. But this time, we do it my way. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. Sometimes it's becoming the person they should have believed in all along. The SEC investigation had gone public, and Daniel's response was swift and brutal. I stared at the morning headlines splashed across every financial news site. Carter Industries faces fraud allegations, whistleblower claims family conspiracy. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Paul was the only call I answered. He's claiming your family orchestrated the whole thing, Paul said. That you fabricated evidence to stop the merger because you were jealous of Evelyn's engagement. And people are believing him. Stocks down 30%. Board members are jumping ship. I watched from my office window as reporters swarmed the building entrance. Daniel had played his hand perfectly, turning my revenge into a weapon against my entire family. My father's secretary appeared at my door. Your father wants to see you. Now. The walk to his office felt like a death march. Inside, I found not just my father, but my mother, Evelyn, and 3 board members I didn't recognize. Explain yourself, Father's voice was ice. I tried to tell you about Daniel. By destroying our company. Mother cut in. By dragging our name through the mud. The evidence is real, I insisted. The SEC confirmation has been withdrawn, one of the board members said. Mr. Reed provided documentation showing how your evidence was manipulated. My stomach dropped. That's impossible. Paul and I verified everything. Paul Mitchell. Father laughed bitterly. Your accomplice who mysteriously disappeared this morning after withdrawing all his investments. The room spun. Paul couldn't have. Wouldn't have. Daniel warned us about him, Evelyn said softly. How Paul was using you to orchestrate a hostile takeover. You're believing Daniel over me. Still. The facts speak for themselves, Father stood. The board has called an emergency meeting. We're facing potential criminal charges because of your vendetta. Robert, Grandfather Henry's voice came from the doorway. Think carefully about your next move. I have, Father pulled out a document. Joe, you're terminated from your position, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You can't. I can and I will. You're no longer welcome at this company or in this family until you make this right. Mother wouldn't meet my eyes. Evelyn stared at her hands. The board members watched with cold satisfaction. Make it right? I laughed, a hollow sound. You mean let Daniel destroy everything grandfather built? Let him marry Evelyn for her shares. Keep pretending we're the perfect family. Get out, father pointed to the door. Before I call security. I turned to leave, then stopped. Grandfather, I'm sorry. I tried to protect the company. I know, pumpkin. His eyes held a strange glint. Sometimes you have to lose everything to win. Security waited outside. As they led me through the lobby, I saw Daniel speaking to reporters, playing the role of the wronged future son-in-law perfectly. My phone buzzed, an unknown number. The message contained only an address and a time, 9 p.m. Come alone. P. Rain started falling as I reached the street. No car, no job, no family. Everything I'd tried to protect was slipping away. Another message arrived, from Grandmother Martha, remember what we taught you about chess. Sometimes you sacrifice your queen to win the game. I looked back at the building that had been my second home, at the empire my grandfather had built. At the family that had finally shown their true colors. Daniel caught my eye through the crowd and smiled, that same smug smile from the engagement dinner. He thought he'd won. Maybe he had. But grandmother was right about chess. And I wasn't done playing yet. I pulled up the address Paul had sent. If he had betrayed me, I needed to know why. If he hadn't, then maybe this wasn't checkmate after all. The rain soaked through my clothes as I walked away from Carter Industries, leaving behind everything I'd ever known. Sometimes you have to lose it all to see what really matters. And sometimes rock bottom is just the foundation you need to build something new. The address led to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the financial district. Paul waited inside, surrounded by servers and computer screens, his tie loose around his neck. You're late, he said, not looking up from his laptop. Betrayal tends to slow you down. I kept my distance, scanning for exits. Was any of it real, or were you working with Daniel from the start? Neither. He turned one of the screens toward me. Look familiar. Lines of code scrolled past, but I recognized the pattern, Carter Industries' trading algorithm, the one that had made my father's company millions. Daniel didn't just want the company, Paul said. He wanted this. The algorithm your grandfather developed 30 years ago. A door opened behind me. Grandfather Henry stepped out of the shadows, followed by Grandmother Martha. You're early, pumpkin, grandfather said. Daniel's not due for another 10 minutes. My head spun. You're all working together. We needed Daniel to think he'd won, grandmother explained. To make him careless enough to reveal his real plan. Paul typed rapidly. The algorithm was never about trading. Your grandfather built it to identify financial fraud. Daniel's been trying to crack it for years, to hide his illegal operations. And now he's walking into a trap, I whispered, understanding dawning. But my parents, Evelyn, are exactly where they need to be, grandfather said. Sometimes the best way to protect people is to let them face the truth themselves. The warehouse door creaked open. Daniel strode in, followed by two men in expensive suits. Right on time, he smiled, then froze at the sight of my grandparents. What is this? Chess, I said quietly. Sacrificing the queen to win the game. The SEC isn't withdrawing their investigation, Paul announced, still typing. They're expanding it. Your entire network is being exposed right now. Daniel's smile turned predatory. With what evidence? I destroyed everything you had. No, grandfather stepped forward. You destroyed what we wanted you to find. The real evidence was always in the algorithm, tracking every fraudulent transaction you tried to hide. That's impossible. Your algorithm is just a trading program. It's a fraud detection system, I corrected. One that's been watching you for months. Every shell company, every fake investment, every attempt to hack our systems, it recorded everything. Daniel's companions backed away slowly. His facade cracked completely. You think this changes anything? He snarled. Your family's reputation is still ruined. The company will survive, grandmother said firmly. Truth has a way of healing things. My phone buzzed, a message from Evelyn, just saw the news. Daniel's other victims are coming forward. I'm so sorry, Joe. I should have believed you. It's over, Daniel, Paul said, turning his screen to show dozens of news headlines breaking simultaneously. The SEC has everything they need. Daniel lunged for the nearest computer, but security officers emerged from the shadows, my grandfather's most trusted team. Waiting for exactly this moment. As they led Daniel away, he caught my eye one last time. How long? He demanded. How long have you been planning this? I thought about years of being underestimated, of watching, learning, preparing. Since the moment you thought you could use my sister to steal my grandfather's legacy. After he was gone, Paul showed me the final piece, evidence that Daniel had been planning this for years, targeting other companies the same way. Your father's seeing this too? I asked. Grandfather nodded. Along with the board. Sometimes people need to learn the hard way who they can really trust. My phone lit up again, father calling. I let it ring. Aren't you going to answer? Grandmother asked. No, I said, watching the sunrise through the warehouse windows. They need to understand what it feels like to wait, to wonder if they've lost something precious forever. Paul squeezed my shoulder. What now? I thought about the Harvard acceptance letter, about revenge and justice, about family and trust. Now, I smiled, we rebuild. But this time, we do it right. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just winning the game, it's changing the rules entirely. The Carter Industries boardroom felt different now. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the empty chair where Daniel had once sat, plotting his takeover. My father stood at the head of the table, looking older than I remembered. The SEC investigation is complete, he said, sliding a folder across the polished surface. Daniel Reed will be facing federal charges. I didn't touch the folder. Is that all you wanted to tell me? Joe. He struggled with the words. The board has reviewed your restructuring proposal. The one I should have read last year. And they want to implement it immediately. He paused. Under your leadership. The words hung in the air between us. Through the glass walls, I could see Evelyn waiting outside, nervously shredding a paper cup. Grandfather's algorithm, I said quietly. It wasn't just about catching fraud, was it? No. He sank into his chair. It was about finding the right person to lead this company. Someone who could see past appearances, who understood both numbers and people. And you never thought that person could be me. I was wrong. The admission seemed to cost him physically. About many things. The door opened. Mother entered, followed by my grandparents. She carried a familiar envelope, my Harvard acceptance letter, carefully pieced back together. We can still make this work, she said. The Master of Business Administration program. Isn't what I want anymore. I stood, straightening my jacket. Neither is revenge. Grandfather Henry smiled knowingly. What do you want, pumpkin? I thought about the past months, the anger, the plotting, the satisfaction of bringing Daniel down. But mostly, I thought about what I'd learned about myself. I want to build something, I said. Not just run what's already here. And I want to do it my way. Paul appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. The new trading platform is ready. Should I proceed with the launch? I caught Grandmother Martha's eye. She nodded slightly, understanding what I was about to do. Actually, I said, I have a different proposal. I pulled up the business plan I'd been working on secretly, not just a restructuring, but a complete reimagining of Carter Industries. A merger of old and new, tradition and innovation. 2 companies, I explained. The existing Carter Industries under your leadership, Dad. And a new digital finance division, built around grandfather's algorithm, under mine. Splitting the company. Father frowned. No. Strengthening it. Different approaches, shared resources, mutual protection. I turned to Evelyn. And I want you involved. She blinked in surprise. Me? Your social skills, my financial knowledge. Together, we could build something neither of us could create alone. Mother started to object, but grandfather raised his hand. It's perfect. The past and future, working in harmony. The board won't like it, father warned. The board doesn't have a choice, grandmother said firmly. Henry and I still hold controlling interest. And we're backing Joe's plan. Paul pulled up the contracts on his tablet. Everything's ready. Just need signatures. I watched my father struggle with the decision. Finally, he picked up the stylus. You're not doing this for revenge anymore, are you? He asked. No. I smiled. I'm doing it because it's right. For the company, for this family, and for me. One by one, they signed, father, mother, Evelyn, my grandparents. As Paul processed the documents, I felt a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. To new beginnings. Evelyn offered tentatively. To building something better, I corrected. Outside the boardroom windows, the city stretched endlessly, full of possibilities. I thought about the torn acceptance letter, now carefully restored but no longer needed. Sometimes the best path forward isn't the one you originally planned. Sometimes it's the one you create yourself. Ready to get started? Paul asked. I looked at my family, broken, healing, changing, and felt something stronger than revenge, hope. Yes, I said. I think I finally am.